So today we'll be building a progress bar component using React and StyledComponents. So the way this component works is it visually represents the progress of the user and it also shows it in percentage on the right and also shows you how much of the progress is left. So let's get started. So I have a code sandbox set up for us to build this component, and I have a empty file called progress.jsx where we'll have the code for the component. So the component primarily needs to do a couple of things, right? So the first thing is it should show the progress first of all. Progress, maybe we want to show the percentage of completion in some text on the right. And third, since it's going to be a component, maybe we can offer the users of this component some customizability. So maybe we can change the color and probably the width of the progress bar. So if it's in a smaller space, it could be shorter. If it needs to take the full screen, maybe it's something that the users can customize. So I think this is a good set of requirements to start off with. So first things first, let's get some boilerplate out of the way. So let's pull in React. Let's create our progress bar component and let's export default progress bar. And let's export the component itself. For the progress bar, we could build this from scratch using divs. So you could have like a div that's the background and another div that that animates inside it. But HTML actually has a progress bar component, which is ideally or more semantically the right markup to use in this case. So if you see here, we can have a progress tag. It takes a max value and then the value of the progress that we currently want. So it would show you 70%. There are primarily two attributes that we need to really think about, or what's the max value for the entire progress bar, and from that max value, what's the value that we currently need to show, and the tag would handle how the value fits inside that max value. So let's do that. So let's return a progress tag, and since this progress tag needs a value and a max, let's take that in as props and pass it on to the tag itself. And just to be extra clean about this, let's just add prop types, because that's a good practice to do. So let's pull in prop types and let's define what these props are going to be. So the progress bar dot prop types. So right now we have the value, which is going to be a prop types dot number, and this is going to be a required prop, since to be fair, a progress bar doesn't really make sense if we don't pass it a value, right? And then let's have a max, and this is going to be a number as well. And let's not make this mandatory. Maybe we could have a default prop for this, which has, I mean, most likely we're going to use it on a scale of 100, right? Like 10%, 20%, and so on. So having 100 is probably a good default value for this. Now let's save, jump back to our app. Let's pull in this progress bar component and let's just render it here. So the value is going to be, let's render 40%, right? On a max of 100. Oops. And there we go. We have a simple progress bar that shows you the current value on a max of 100. In most cases, we won't be using it as is to show static data. So to kind of showcase how this would work with dynamically changing values, let's just add some logic to the app itself. So let's pull in a couple of hooks. So let's have a value that's controlled by the app itself, and this starts with a value of 0, and then on the mount of this app, which is a use effect with basically no dependencies, let's create a interval that's going to run every second, and all this interval is going to do is set the value and bump the current value by 10 and essentially re-render this progress bar. So we have a set value, and I'm using the callback form of the setter so that we can have a little bit more control. So we have a new value. So this is the old value plus 10, and just for some cleanup, if the new value is 100, then clear the interval that we set up so that it doesn't progress beyond 100. And finally, let's return the new value. So let's finally funnel this value as a prop here. So you can see that the progress bar actually just moves by 10, and once it hits 100, it stops. So that kind of closes our first point here. It should show the progress. So now let's work on the second point, which is to show the percentage of completion in textual format. So that would require us to just add probably another span here. But since we have two elements, we'll probably put this inside a div. And all this span's going to have is the value divided by the max into 100%. Okay, now that we have this, let's just refresh and see if this works. And there we go. So we have the progress moving visually, and we also have the progress in text. So now that we have it show the progress, so that's point number 1, and we also show the percentage of completion in text, that's point number 2. The last bit is to control the color and the width, and this is where we would probably be pulling in style components to make our life a little bit easier. So let's import styled from style components, and let's style this div so that we have a little bit more control. So maybe call this a container, and this is going to be a style.div. Inside this container, the things that we want to control are the progress and the span, maybe not the span as much. So let's target the progress, and let's just add a little bit of spacing between the bar and the text. So that's a margin right of probably 8 pixels. And now let's get into the actual customizing of the color and width. So let's take these two as props first. So the color is going to be a, let's see, it's a string. Should we make it required? Probably not. Let's have a default instead. And finally the width is going to be a string as well, and this is going to have a default as well. So the width is going to be maybe 250 pixels, and the color is going to be light blue. Okay, and now that we have these set up, let's send the color as a prop to our style component. So now that we've powered in the color and the width props to the container, we can now wire this in to change the width of the progress bar as well as the color of this. So right now it's blue. Let's have users have some way to customize this. So the way you style a progress element is slightly tricky. There are different parts that you get to select and change, and it varies greatly based on the browser that you're on. So CSS Tricks has a excellent article on styling the progress element, and we'll actually be using pieces from here for our use case. So the first things first, we need to control the width. We do that by selecting a progress who has a value. So let's do that. So now the progress has a value. Let's set the width to props dot width. And since we set a default value for the width here, we don't have to worry about a default value here. So now that we've done that, let's just see if that's working. So let's say my width, the default width is 50. I can see that's changed here. And if I change this back to 250, it updates there as well. So cool, we have a way for us to target the width and style it accordingly. And now the last customizable piece that we have here is the color. So for color, we actually need to undo the default styling that browsers have and then apply the styling that we need to apply. So for that, let's undo the appearance that is or undo the styling that is applied by, in this case, Chrome. So let's just get rid of that. And I mean, it's a tad bit ugly, but like we can restyle it to look like how it was before. So for that, we need to use the two selectors for selecting one, the background, and by background I mean this gray area, and two, for selecting the piece here that's now translating across the progress bar. So for doing that, we have two pseudo selectors, and those pseudo selectors are the WebKit progress bar and the WebKit progress value, right? So now any progress has a value. Let's select the progress bar itself. So what do we want this bar to have? We want the bar to have a default height of 6 pixels, because I believe that was what we had. Okay, maybe not 6, 10. Yeah, 10 looks about right. And we also had a nice rounded edge, so that's a border radius of maybe 20 pixels. And then maybe undo this dark gray background color that we currently have to something a little bit more neater. So maybe a light gray, like that. Now that we've undone the styling for the background, now comes the actual part, which is tweaking the color that we want the progress bar to have. So for that, we will be using the WebKit progress value selector. It's going to be the same as this, except this is the value that we're targeting. Height's 10, border radius is 20, and the background color here in this case is going to be props dot, oops, it's going to take the color from the props, so props dot color, or we don't need to pass a default here because we're passing a default in the default props. So let's see, and that works. So let's actually control this from the app itself. So we have a value, we have a max. Let's say the color is going to be I don't know, red, and the width is going to be 300 pixels. Should probably make these strings. So we have a progress bar that lets us control the width, lets us control the color of the progress bar, and also keeps to some semantic markup, so that we aren't really recreating things from scratch, but rather using what the platform provides us in the first place. So that's all we have for today. If you found this video useful, please leave a like, maybe subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.